am in the United States at the invitation of the American side. This trip was planned long ago and was not cancelled by the American side, despite a number of unfriendly actions that the American side has recently taken. We see, as President Putin said yesterday, that the language of pressure does not work with Russia. The British economy is in a dire state, the EU economy is in a dire state, and it is important for them to create the image of Russia as the enemy. Therefore, we will continue discussions with the American side, continue our dialogue with the American side. It's also very important that we see it is Ukraine that is dragging out the negotiations. It is Ukraine that does not want to resolve those problems, those accumulated issues that need to be addressed. And that is why we will also make it clear to our American colleagues that, unfortunately, it is Ukraine that is disrupting the necessary dialogue. United States at the invitation of the American side. This trip was planned long ago and was not cancelled by the American side, despite a number of unfriendly actions that the American side has recently taken. We see, as President Putin said yesterday, that the language of pressure does not work with Russia, and it is very important that national interests and Russia's security interests are always clearly taken into account. Therefore, the potential for economic cooperation between us and Russia remains, but only if there is a respectful attitude toward Russia's interests. We also see a great number of attempts by our European colleagues and by Britain to disrupt any direct dialogue between Russia and the US, any direct dialogue between President Putin and President Trump. This is due to the fact that many attempts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine were thwarted by both the British and the Europeans. Just remember Boris Johnson, who, when a peace agreement was practically already in place, came and, after receiving £1 million from his sponsors, said, "No, there's no need to make a peace agreement with Russia." That is why these attempts by those who want to prolong the Ukrainian conflict are connected to the fact that the British economy is in a dire state, the EU economy is in a dire state, and it is important for them to create the image of Russia as the enemy. Therefore, we will continue discussions with the American side, continue our dialogue with the American side, clearly conveying Russia's position. And Russia's position is that Russia's national interests must be respected and that those sanctions and unfriendly measures will have absolutely no impact on the Russian economy. They will simply lead to higher prices at gas stations in the US because accordingly oil market prices have already risen and will continue to rise. That's why Biden's opposition, these false narratives from Biden that they're trying to impose on the Trump administration, we've seen that they have never worked. We will make it clear to our American colleagues that they shouldn't become like Biden, that they shouldn't follow Biden's false, absolutely wrong and failed approaches and those of his administration. And it's also very important that we see it is Ukraine that is dragging out the negotiations. It is Ukraine that does not want to resolve those problems, those accumulated issues that need to be addressed. And that is why we will also make it clear to our American colleagues that, unfortunately, it is Ukraine that is disrupting the necessary dialogue, and they are doing so at the request of the British, at the request of the Europeans who want the conflict to continue. You know, we won't go into detail about whom we are meeting with. We are meeting with several representatives of the administration. There will also be another meeting, which I think we will make public. But most of the discussions will be held behind closed doors about how to continue the dialogue, once again based on a respectful attitude toward Russia's interests and an understanding of Russia's position, which the President spoke about yesterday.
After our American colleague made his decision, he ultimately decided to cancel or postpone this meeting. Rather, he is talking about postponing the meeting. Now, regarding the new sanctions. First of all, there is nothing new here. Yes, they are serious for us. That is clear. And they will have certain consequences, but overall, they will not significantly affect our economic well-being. The number of sanctions that have been imposed against the Russian Federation up to now. This is, of course, an attempt to put pressure on Russia. But no self-respecting country and no self-respecting people ever make decisions under pressure. under pressure. And undoubtedly, Russia has the privilege of feeling and considering itself among this list of self-respecting countries and peoples. It holds first place. Saudi Arabia is in second place, 10 million. Of course, this is an unfriendly act towards Russia. This is obvious. And it does not strengthen Russian-American relations, which had only just begun to recover. Of course, with such actions, the US administration is damaging Russian-American relations. Some processes will be sensitive. In this regard, the US consumes 20 million. They sell something and buy even more, mainly from Canada. So they produce 13.5 and consume 20. The Russian Federation and Saudi Arabia, they sell more. Saudi Arabia exports about 9 million tons to the foreign market, and the Russian Federation exports 7.5. That is, our contribution to the global energy balance is very significant. And now this balance has been established overall, both in the interest of consumers and producers. Disrupting this balance is quite a thing. It's a very thankless task, including for those who are trying to do it. Such decisions need to be understood. Who do they actually benefit? Of course, it is possible to replace some, though certainly not all. That's impossible. But some portion of Russian oil and petroleum products on the world market. But firstly, this takes time. Secondly, it requires significant investment. I hope this will not lead to serious changes, to sharply increase. It is not possible to do this instantly. But if the amount of our oil and petroleum products on the world market suddenly decreases, prices will rise. My American colleague and I also discussed this. What will this lead to? This will lead to a sharp increase in the cost of oil and petroleum products, including at gas stations. What truly matters to us is something else. We feel confident and stable, and despite certain losses, which of course will be connected to many different circumstances, our energy sector still feels quite secure overall. To consider oneself among the list of self-respecting countries and peoples. Both the meeting itself, as well as its specific location, were initially proposed and suggested by the American side. And I agreed to this arrangement, but I also made sure to express my thoughts and opinions in this regard, and I said that, of course, such important meetings need to be very well prepared in advance. For both myself and the American president, it would be a significant mistake to approach this matter lightly or to leave the meeting without achieving the expected and desired result. They sell something, and in return they buy even more, which is an interesting dynamic to consider. I should say that the President of the United States agreed with this, completely agreed, and said that on their side, a whole group of officials from the current administration would be working on preparing this meeting. He named some of them, and I said that after our American colleague finalizes the list of those who will be working on preparing our meeting, we will also announce who will be working on our side, on the Russian side. But at the initial stage, without any doubt, the first steps in this direction should be taken by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Lavrov, and Secretary of State, Rubio. About 9 million tons. The Russian Federation, 7.5. So the US president has decided to cancel or postpone this meeting. More likely, he's talking about postponing the meeting. Well, what can I say, really? Dialogue is always better than any kind of confrontation, than arguments, or especially war. That's why we have always supported this, the continuation of dialogue, and we continue to support it now.